Hello, my name is Joel Christian Tinney. I'm a Christian evangelist and the president and founder of Alpha Numa Ministries. 3 years ago, there was a war that broke out between Azerbaijani forces and Armenia. And in 44 days, 5,000 Christian Armenian soldiers were murdered, leaving behind widows and fatherless children. My wife and I felt the call from the Lord to sell our own possessions and to go overseas to help the Armenian widows and fatherless. This crisis that is going on goes back over 100 years. The Ottoman Turks in 1915 perpetrated a genocide on the Armenian people. They murdered over 1.5 million Christians, sent them on death marches through the Syrian desert. Just recently, December 12, 2022, Azerbaijani security forces enforced a blockade at the Lachen Corridor. The Lachen Corridor is what's called the Road of Life, which goes into Artsakh from Armenia. It is the only highway which brings forth food and resources, medicine, fuel into the Republic of Artsakh. Artsakh is a territory which is a disputed territory. It is a republic, self-determined, but has not been recognized by former nations and other nations since its existence. But it is part of historic Armenia, and the Lachen Corridor was closed since December 12, 2022, starving over 120,000 Christian believers in Jesus in Artsakh, Nagorno-Karbakh. Just yesterday, I attended a hearing on Capitol Hill concerning Nagorno-Karabakh. I met with representatives and international defense attorney Luis Ocampo and provided evidence of the war crimes perpetrated by Azerbaijanis against the Armenians in the 2020 Karbach War and in the present. I'm seeking to raise awareness to this crisis and dire situation. 120,000 Christian believers are dying as we speak, and they may have only 3 weeks left to live. This is how urgent it is. But because of the State Department and foreign relations, we have a conflict of interest. And I am urging our elected officials to go against the former policies which they've had concerning Armenia, and to vote in favor of bills passing legislation to impose sanctions and tariffs on Azerbaijan for their war crimes against humanity. They violated international laws. They are guilty of perpetrating a genocide. Over 120,000 Armenian Christian believers in Artsakh are starving to death as we speak. I'm just a pastor, a missionary, an evangelist. I have never run for political office and I have no political aspirations, but yet I am exercising my First and my Fourth Amendment right. The same rights that you can exercise as a United States citizen. And it is incumbent upon us as evangelical Christians and Americans who value human rights and freedoms and who wish for the United States to not be tried in international court for complacency, apathy, and indifference concerning this genocide, which would make them guilty by proxy. It is incumbent upon us to petition our elected representatives to speak to them concerning this issue. In the 2020 Karbach War, civilians were bombed with cluster bombs by Azerbaijani forces in Karbach, in Artsakh. Cluster bombs and phosphorus fell on them and burned them, killed them. I've reviewed much footage of beheadings that were perpetrated by Azeri forces, by ISIS, hired mercenaries of the Azeri government to fight the war for them, so they themselves wouldn't lose so much life in the conflict. And I have wept with the widows and grieved with the fatherless children whose fathers will never return home. 5,000 Christian martyrs. This is not simply a war and an ongoing crisis. This is genocide. And this is Azeri Islamic brutality against Christians. Turkic aggression towards Christians has been going on for over 200 years. The Ottoman Empire in the Hamidian massacres drove Greeks, Cypriots, Iraqi Christians, and Armenians through death marches and massacred them on a mass scale. And they knew that during World War I, because of the conflict that was going on in Europe, they could get away with the genocide, which they ended up getting away with. Many countries have yet to recognize the genocide today. It wasn't until 2021 that Biden recognized the genocide in April. I was in Yerevan, Armenia in April 2021. I was at the Genocide Memorial for the commemoration of the genocide, which took place in 1915 through 1923. That genocide where 1.5 million Christian Armenians were massacred. There I sang in Armenian and saw many Armenian people weep as they saw an American standing with them in solidarity. And this film is simply to urge you all to stand in solidarity, not just with the Armenians in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, but with Christians. This is a Christian issue. This is a humanitarian issue. It shouldn't be political. We shouldn't have U.S. foreign policy which keeps our hands bound from helping Christians that are being persecuted, targeted, murdered on mass scale. 2 days ago, I got off the phone with an Armenian living in Artsakh. She lost her pregnancy. She was 6 months along. She lost the pregnancy due to malnutrition. She could not sustain life in her womb. Many, many women in Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, are experiencing the same thing today. They are losing their children. Many, many pregnancies are ending in miscarriages because of the malnutrition that is happening to these women because of the blockade at the Lachen corridor. And as I said before, U.S. policy and the State Department should not have their hands bound concerning this issue, because we are committed to abide as Americans and as the United States government by international laws concerning genocide. And if we fail to act in this issue, and we only have maybe 3 weeks, then we will be guilty of this genocide by proxy of our apathy and indifference, according to international genocidal law. Law that was put into place after 1944 when the Jews were massacred in the Holocaust. We did the Berlin airlifts at that time. We rescued the Jews. My wife's great uncle was one of the liberators of the Dachau concentration camp. Why is it that the United States could get so involved when helping the Jewish people, but yet they turned a blind eye to the oldest ethnic Christian minority in the Middle East, in Armenia? And if we fail to act and do not petition our elected U.S. representatives and urge Washington to push this issue forward, we will see the oldest Christian minority in the whole entire world completely exterminated and wiped off the face of the planet. Armenia and Artsakh will fail, and they will face complete and total extermination. Armenia and Artsakh will be wiped off the face of the earth if we don't petition our elected representatives and work pushing Washington to stand on the right side of history. And I urge you and all elected representatives and every single voter in the United States to stand on the right side of history. I urge you to share this video. I urge you to get the word out. We are running out of time. And the reality is, out of this 120,000 starving Christians living in Artsakh, 30,000 are children. Many of these families I do know because of my work in Artsakh and Armenia for the last 3 years. And for the last 9 months, they've been without food and water and medical supplies and internet and fuel, to run all of their agricultural machinery, such as tractors and plows and sprayers and everything else. They haven't been able to produce crops. If we fail to act, we will see 120,000 ethnic Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh and Artsakh, which is Armenia, completely wiped off the face of the earth. And we will be complicit because of our apathy and indifference in genocide. The former prosecutor in the International Court, Luis Ocampo, ruled at the Nagorno-Karabakh hearing that this is a genocide. It is a genocide. And if we fail to act, we are guilty of this. And one day, each and every one of us will stand before a holy and just God, whether you believe it or not. Each and every one of us will give an account for our failure to act on this issue. Friedrich Bonhoeffer, a German theologian living in Germany during World War II, said, "Not to act is to act, and not to speak is to speak." It's a stark reminder that our failure to act makes an impact regardless. Our failure to speak makes an impact regardless. Let us not be complacent, apathetic, and indifferent to the 120,000 oldest Christian minority in the world, the ethnic Armenians living in Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh. Let's do something together. Let's rally together. I am urging all elected representatives to act on this issue, supporting Armenia and Artsakh. As a pastor, I'm using my influence and my platform to speak to our elected representatives and to urge them. Recently, I spoke with former Vice President Mike Pence at an event in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. I was broadcasted on C-SPAN, and the conversation went as follows. Mike Pence, pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for your service to our country. I'm a Christian like yourself. My wife and I are missionaries in Armenia. Do you know what's going on in Artsakh? The former vice president replied, "I've been watching, but fill me in." I said, there are 120,000 Christians in Artsakh that have been starving to death for the last 9 months due to a blockade at Lachin corridor. I recently met former Vice President Mike Pence at an event in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. This event was broadcasted, and his visit was broadcasted on C-SPAN. When I met former Vice President Mike Pence, I shook his hand. I thanked him for his 4 years of service to our country. And I asked him the question if he knew what was going on with the Armenians living in Artsakh. He said, "I've been watching, but fill me in." I said, there are 120,000 Christian believers in Jesus that have been starving to death for the last 9 months due to a blockade imposed by the Azerbaijani forces at the Lachin corridor. The former vice president then said to me, "I want to know more about it." With his hand on my arm, he looked at me in the eyes and said, "Let me give you some contact information." He gave me his contact information, and he told me then that he would push the issue with people in Congress and that his brother is in Congress. I've written since then to the former Vice President Mike Pence, and he has yet to respond. And this letter was entered in as evidence on the record for the Nagorno-Karabakh hearing. We need to hold our elected representatives to account, and those who are running for the highest office in the land. They need to be made aware of this situation. If they cannot stand for the oldest Christian nation and oldest Christian ethnic minority in the world, then how can we expect them, as evangelical Christians living in America, to really uphold our values, our freedoms, and our beliefs? If you've ever visited Armenia or Artsakh, they have some of the oldest churches in existence today, some over a millennia old. Beautiful hachkars, Armenian crosses, culture, tradition. The food is amazing. The people are amazing. And they are the most hospitable people you would ever meet in the world. They will welcome you into their home, no questions asked, and sit you down at their table and lay before you a feast, giving all the food that they have to welcome their unexpected guest. That was the experience that I had. Widows and fatherless giving what they had to me because they were so grateful to have a guest. In Armenia, guests are considered gifts. You are their gift. This love and compassion and kindness, the hospitality, was never murdered, was never killed. That Armenian spirit lives on in the diaspora and in Armenia and in Artsakh. The oldest Christian nation. It is at its final countdown. Without our intervention, our aid, and our help. You can get involved by going to the links in the description. You can get active in petitioning your local elected representatives to push this issue in Washington. Let us pray for all persecuted Christians in the Middle East, in Central Asia, in the Caucasus. Let's believe God for a miracle for the Armenian people. I am evangelist Joel Christian Tenney, president and founder of Alpha Numa Ministries, and I thank you for watching this.